They ruled the world of wealth, billion-dollar empires, luxury estates, and armies of lawyers. But when power meets greed, the fall is always spectacular. These are the billionaires who thought their money made them immune to justice. Until the handcuffs clicked. From sex trafficking and Ponzi schemes to bribery, murder plots, and a prison escape straight out of Hollywood, this is not fiction. Before we start, subscribe to our channel for mind-blowing prison stories, shocking cases, and criminal mysteries you won't find anywhere else. Now, let's begin. Number 10. Jeffrey Epstein, the monster in the mansion. To the world, Jeffrey Epstein was a genius investor, a mysterious billionaire, a man who walked among presidents, royalty, scientists, and supermodels. He hosted private dinners with Nobel laureates, attended galas with former US presidents, and funded elite institutions like Harvard and MIT, but beneath the illusion of influence and charm was something far more sinister, something monstrous. This is the story of a man who built his empire not just on money, but on control, blackmail, and human suffering. A man whose crimes shocked the world not only because of their scale, but because of the people who may have looked the other way. Jeffrey Edward Epstein was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1953. He was smart, exceptionally smart. But unlike most people who climbed into high society through traditional routes, Epstein's ascent was more like a leap through loopholes. He started his career as a math teacher at the prestigious Dalton School in Manhattan, despite lacking a college degree. There he made connections. One of the student's fathers, Alan Ace Greenberg of Bear Stearns, took notice and offered him a job. Epstein left teaching and joined the world of high finance. At Bear Stearns, he flourished. Quick, persuasive, and charming when he wanted to be, Epstein became a limited partner in just 4 years. Then, in the early 80s, he left to start his own financial consulting firm, J. Epstein & Co. But here's the catch: he claimed he only worked with clients worth more than $1 billion. No one knew exactly who his clients were. It all remained a secret, wrapped in layers of shell companies and offshore accounts. He was rich, but no one could explain how. Epstein's true power came from the people around him. He cultivated friendships with the rich and powerful former US presidents, British royals, top scientists, tech moguls. He used his money to open doors, and once inside, he stayed there. He donated millions to scientific institutions. He hosted lavish dinners with intellectuals and celebrities. He portrayed himself as a patron of knowledge and progress. But behind the scenes, he was collecting something even more valuable than connections leverage. Epstein was known to have surveillance systems in many of his properties. Cameras were hidden in the walls. Some visitors speculated, was he gathering compromat? Was he filming the powerful in compromising situations? Was that how he stayed untouchable for so long? Jeffrey Epstein owned one of the most expensive homes in Manhattan, a 7-story, 40-room mansion on the Upper East Side, once valued at $77 million. Behind its ornate doors, police would later uncover a gallery of horror. During the 2019 FBI raid, investigators found thousands of photos, some locked in safes, others stored on hard drives. Many were images of underage girls. They also found piles of cash, diamonds, foreign passports, and a strange black book filled with names, some of the most powerful names on Earth. The mansion wasn't a home. It was a trap. A place where young girls were groomed, abused, and discarded. Where favors were exchanged for silence. Where Epstein lived like a king and ruled like a predator. It started subtly. A friend of a friend. An offer to make money. Epstein's method of recruitment was methodical. He targeted vulnerable young girls, many from broken homes or low-income families. His longtime companion, Ghislaine Maxwell, often played a central role, allegedly luring girls with promises of modeling opportunities or easy cash for massages. What followed was a routine, a massage that turned sexual. The promise of more money, a twisted normalization of abuse. And then, the next girl. The victims were often told to bring other girls. More money, more favors. It became a machine, a self-sustaining network of silence and shame. Some girls were as young as 14, some never told anyone. Others tried and were ignored. In 2005, the parents of a 14-year-old girl contacted the Palm Beach Police Department. She had gone to Epstein's mansion to give a massage and came home traumatized. Police began a covert investigation. What they uncovered was shocking. Dozens of underage girls, a ritual of abuse, a pattern. Police compiled evidence, photos, witness statements, phone logs, appointment books. They believed they had enough to charge Epstein with serious felonies. But then, something happened. In 2007, federal prosecutors, led by then U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, struck a secret plea deal with Epstein. Despite evidence of trafficking and abuse, Epstein was charged with just 2 state-level offenses: soliciting prostitution and soliciting a minor for prostitution. He served 13 months in a county jail. During his sentence, he was allowed to leave the facility 6 days a week for up to 12 hours a day on work release. He lived in a private wing. He had a driver. He had visitors. It wasn't justice, it was a cover-up. And worse, the victims were never informed of the deal, a violation of federal law. Epstein came out of jail disgraced, but not destroyed. He returned to his New York mansion. He reopened his social circle. He continued flying to Paris, to his ranch in New Mexico, to the Virgin Islands. He was listed again in media as a philanthropist. Some of his old friends distanced themselves, but many stayed close. The silence was deafening. Behind the scenes, the machine may have kept going. Victims were still scared. Lawsuits continued, but Epstein, protected by lawyers and money, stayed free until 2019. In July 2019, Epstein was arrested at a New Jersey airport after returning from Paris. The Southern District of New York had reopened the case. This time, the charges were more serious: sex trafficking of minors across state and international lines. The FBI raided his Manhattan home. The evidence was overwhelming. Hundreds of victims came forward. Some were adults now, but the memories hadn't faded. They told their stories publicly. They named names. For the first time, Epstein was truly cornered. Epstein's private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Little St. James, became the symbol of his crimes. Nicknamed Pedophile Island by locals, it was an isolated haven where Epstein allegedly brought underage girls, wealthy guests, and business associates. Survivors described being trafficked there, held against their will, and assaulted by Epstein and others. Flight logs showed a steady stream of famous names visiting the island. Some denied wrongdoing, others stayed silent. The island was wired with surveillance. But what was captured on those tapes remains a mystery. On August 10, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his jail cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. The official cause, suicide by hanging. But almost immediately, the circumstances raised alarm. The surveillance cameras malfunctioned. The guards reportedly fell asleep. He was removed from suicide watch despite an earlier attempt. The autopsy showed broken bones more consistent with homicide than hanging. Millions of people around the world asked the same question. Did Epstein really kill himself, or was he silenced? With Epstein gone, the legal spotlight turned to Ghislaine Maxwell, his longtime companion and alleged co-conspirator. In 2021, she was found guilty on multiple counts related to trafficking and abuse. Survivors spoke out in court, giving voice to years of silence. Some described how Epstein had stolen their childhoods. Others said the justice system had failed them too many times to count. Lawsuits continue. Many of Epstein's associates are still under scrutiny. Some have been sued. Some have disappeared from public view. The fight for justice isn't over. Epstein's story is not just about one man. It's about a system of privilege, power, and silence. How many people looked the other way? How many powerful institutions took his money and never asked where it came from? How many victims were ignored for years because their abuser was rich? Who else was involved? Where is the footage he recorded? Why were so many doors open for him? And what did it cost to keep them open? In the end, Epstein was not just a monster in a mansion. He was a mirror reflecting the darkest truths about money, power, and the price of silence. Number 9. Eike Batista, from Brazil's richest man to a 30-year sentence. He was the man who promised to turn Brazil into a global superpower. A self-made billionaire, a playboy, a visionary, Eike Batista once claimed he'd become the richest man on earth. For a time, that didn't seem so far-fetched. Born into power and privilege, Eike was the son of Eliezer Batista, Brazil's former mining minister and head of Vale, one of the world's largest mining companies. But Eike didn't ride on his father's coattails. He dropped out of engineering school in Germany, returned to Brazil, and started trading gold at age 23. Within a year, he'd made millions. Eike's rise was like a rocket. And that was no coincidence. He branded all his companies with an X, symbolizing multiplication and explosive growth. He didn't just build wealth. He built an empire. His holding company, EBX, controlled a constellation of ventures: OGX, oil and gas exploration; MPX, energy; LLX, logistics; MMX, mining; OSX, offshore equipment. At his peak in 2012, Eike Batista was worth an estimated $35 billion. He ranked among the world's top 10 richest people. His companies were listed on the Brazilian stock exchange, and foreign investors poured billions into his vision of a modernized, self-sufficient Brazil. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a celebrity. Eike drove Lamborghinis, hosted Formula One racers at his beachfront mansion, married a beauty queen, and gave media interviews wearing Rolex watches and open silk shirts. He was a regular in gossip magazines and investor conferences alike. But behind the yachts and flashy suits, something was quietly cracking. The empire began to show signs of trouble in 2013. Investors were promised billions of barrels of oil from OGX fields, but the wells came up dry. Earnings reports didn't match projections. Projects ran over budget. Deadlines slipped. The once golden promise of EBX began to rot under scrutiny. Analysts accused Eike of overhyping resources, cooking forecasts, and padding valuations. OGX stock crashed over 95% in a matter of months. Billions evaporated. Investors were furious. And Eike? He tried to stay calm. He made grand speeches, reassured the public, and claimed it was all part of a temporary setback. But it wasn't. It was the beginning of the end. Between 2013 and 2014, Eike Batista lost nearly $30 billion, the largest personal wealth drop in modern history. By 2014, he had officially lost billionaire status. His companies filed for bankruptcy. Thousands of employees were laid off. Brazilian financial markets trembled under the weight of his collapse. Once called the face of Brazil's future, Eike was now branded a national embarrassment. But what was more damaging than the financial crash were the secrets it uncovered. Investigators began to peel back the layers of the EBX empire. And what they found was corruption at its core. Eike Batista wasn't just unlucky in business. He was corrupt. Very corrupt. In 2014, Brazil launched Operation Lava Jato, known globally as Operation Car Wash, a sweeping anti-corruption probe that would become one of the largest in history. It exposed a massive web of bribery, fraud, and money laundering involving Brazil's top business and political elite. And Eike's name was all over it. He was accused of paying millions in bribes to secure contracts, manipulate market access, and protect his crumbling empire. One of the central figures he was linked to was Sergio Cabral, the powerful former governor of Rio de Janeiro. In exchange for kickbacks, Cabral allegedly helped Batista's companies win state contracts and receive favorable treatment. The once shining image of Eike Batista as a maverick entrepreneur was now stained by scandal. In January 2017, Brazilian authorities issued an arrest warrant for Eike Batista. But by the time they arrived, Eike had already left the country on a commercial flight to New York. For 48 hours, the press speculated whether he would flee or return. Then, to the shock of many, he voluntarily boarded a plane back to Rio. Upon arrival, he was immediately arrested and placed in Bangu 9, one of Brazil's most notorious prisons. The man who once hosted dignitaries in mansions was now in a cement cell. No Rolex, no Lamborghini, just a metal bunk and a plastic bucket. In 2018, Batista was formally convicted of bribery and money laundering. The judge found that he had paid $16.5 million in bribes to Governor Cabral through offshore accounts and fake contracts. In return, Batista received political favors, insider knowledge, and protection for his business empire. But it wasn't just the bribes. The court also reviewed charges of market manipulation, fraudulent communication to investors, and concealment of financial losses. It was a full-scale house of cards, a carefully built illusion of success funded by deception and political payoffs. Judge Marcelo Bretas sentenced Batista to 30 years in prison. In his ruling, he wrote, "Eike Batista used the financial system and public institutions as tools for his own illegal enrichment." At its peak, EBX employed over 20,000 people. Now its buildings stand empty. Rusting oil rigs, half-built ports, and abandoned mining fields litter the Brazilian landscape. The dreams Ike sold of a modern, powerful Brazil collapsed like dominoes. Thousands of families lost savings. Pension funds were wiped out. Foreign investors sued. And Brazil's reputation took a hit it still hasn't fully recovered from. All because one man built an empire on ego, inflated promises, and bribes. Though sentenced to 30 years, Eike Batista has not spent all of that time in a regular cell. Due to Brazil's shifting legal system, some of his sentence has been served under house arrest. Still, the contrast is surreal. The man once worth billions now lives in a modest Rio apartment. He wears an ankle monitor. He gave up his prized cars, his jet, his mansion on Lagoa Rodrigo de Freitas. He tried to publish a memoir to tell his side of the story. But few believed his narrative of being the victim of politics and market forces. His reputation remains shredded. So what is Eike Batista's legacy? For some, it's a cautionary tale. A reminder that unchecked ego, corruption, and arrogance, no matter how shiny, will eventually rot from the inside. For others, it's a reflection of systemic issues in Brazil's political and business culture. He was a product of his environment. Yes, but he also exploited it ruthlessly. His name still sparks anger, especially among those who believed in him. Investors, workers, citizens who saw him as a symbol of national progress. Instead, he became a symbol of betrayal. Jeffrey Epstein bought silence. Eike Batista bought power. But in the end, neither could buy freedom. For Eike Batista, the fall was just as legendary as the rise. A man who thought he could rewrite the rules of business and government ended up becoming a prisoner of his own ambition. He's not just a fallen billionaire. He is Brazil's most spectacular cautionary tale. Number 8. Igor Putin, the family name that couldn't protect him. In Russia, a name can open any door. And no name carries more weight than Putin. Igor Putin isn't just a wealthy banker or businessman. He's the first cousin of Vladimir Putin, one of the most powerful men on the planet. That connection gave him everything: status, access, and immunity. Or so it seemed. Igor Alexandrovich Putin was born in 1953 in the Ryazan region of the Soviet Union, the same year as his cousin Vladimir. While Vladimir built his career through the KGB and climbed to the presidency, Igor took a more corporate path. He graduated from a military communications academy and spent years as an army colonel. But in the post-Soviet 1990s, he saw where the real power was shifting: finance and industry. He rebranded himself as a businessman. His name Putin opened boardroom doors from Moscow to Cyprus. He joined banks, oil transport firms, and was appointed to high-level positions in Russian railways and Avtovazbank. From the outside, it looked legitimate. But behind the curtain, Igor was sitting on top of something far more dangerous. In 2014, the world learned of a vast international money laundering scheme, involving over $20 billion moved out of Russia through fake loans, offshore companies, and corrupt banks. Journalists and financial watchdogs dubbed it the Russian laundromat. At the heart of it all, a series of banks, including Promsvyazbank, Lantena Trade, and Ruske Zemelny Bank, all with links to Igor Putin. Investigations showed that Igor was a board member or shareholder in multiple institutions that processed thousands of suspicious transactions. Money flowed from Russia to Moldova, then through Latvia, Cyprus, and the UK cleansed through shell corporations and moved into luxury real estate, yachts, and Western accounts. The method was simple but massive. 1. Fake lawsuits in Moldovan courts approved phony debt claims. 2 Moldovan judges signed off on fake payments. 3. Russian companies wired billions out of the country legally. The money was gone, and no one stopped it. Reporters from the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, OCCRP, spent years following the trail. Leaked banking records showed that major Western banks including HSBC, Deutsche Bank, and Royal Bank of Scotland processed billions in suspect funds without raising alarms. And then came the smoking gun. Many of the laundering banks were either founded or linked directly to Igor Putin. He denied involvement. He claimed he wasn't aware of the illicit activities. But as more documents came to light, the evidence piled up. Bank Russia, where Igor was once a top executive, was singled out by US authorities as the personal bank of Russian elites. Several banks with Igor's name on the board were shut down or stripped of licenses by Russian regulators. Even Russia's central bank admitted something was wrong. But Igor kept going. The global community started to take action. After the annexation of Crimea and the rise of Russian hybrid warfare, Western governments began freezing the assets of those close to the Kremlin. In 2014, Igor Putin's name appeared in sanction-related investigations tied to illegal financial flows and kleptocratic networks. Though he wasn't formally sanctioned, his business partners were, his banks were, his clients were. But here's the catch. Igor wasn't some rogue operator. He was part of the system, a cog, in a machine that blurred the lines between state power and private wealth. And he wasn't just laundering money, he was laundering influence. As the scandal widened, European regulators started to act. In Latvia, Trasta Komercbanka, a key laundering bank with ties to Igor's network, was shut down. In Estonia, Danske Bank faced the largest money laundering probe in European history. $230 billion traced through accounts with Russian origins. Several high-profile bankers were arrested. Bank licenses were revoked. In 2019, reports emerged that Igor Putin was under investigation by EU law enforcement agencies and had been linked to several pending asset seizures across Europe. Sources revealed he was suspected of acting as a facilitator in multiple transnational laundering operations, involving real estate in Spain, Cyprus, and the UK. Some called it the downfall of a quiet kingmaker. Despite the revelations, Russian media remained quiet. Very few dared to publicly challenge someone tied to the Putin dynasty. But behind the scenes, pressure mounted. Igor was removed from several corporate boards. His banking licenses were revoked. Internal Russian investigations linked his firms to missing funds from state-controlled projects. Still, he wasn't arrested. Why? Because in Russia, power protects its own until it doesn't. In 2023, something changed. As the global crackdown on Russian oligarchs intensified, Igor Putin found himself maimed in several Interpol-connected investigations. Unsealed EU reports alleged that he had personally signed off on suspicious wire transfers, approved fake loan schemes through shell entities, used his name to secure offshore protection for criminal assets. French authorities began proceedings to seize properties linked to him in Nice and Monaco. Swiss banks froze multiple accounts under review. The UK Parliament listed him in an intelligence dossier titled Russia's Silent Money Network. Suddenly, silence couldn't protect him anymore. By 2024, the geopolitical landscape had changed dramatically. With international sanctions choking Russia's elite and the war in Ukraine grinding on, the Kremlin began sacrificing lower-tier oligarchs to protect the inner circle. Igor, once protected by his last name, was now expendable. He was interrogated under internal audit. Several of his assets were quietly nationalized. Even his passport privileges were suspended for travel outside Eurasia. He had become a liability. The man who once used his name to climb was now falling because of it. Today, Igor Putin is not in a cell, but he is effectively under house arrest according to leaked EU diplomatic cables. He remains in Moscow restricted, watched, erased from public life. No more boardrooms, no more interviews, no more leverage. He tried to build an empire in the shadow of power. But in the end, his greatest asset, his name, became his greatest curse. Because when you're close to the throne, you're also close to the fire. Igor Putin wasn't a cartoon villain or a criminal mastermind. He was the middleman, the facilitator, the smooth-faced cousin who helped turn dirty money into clean power. But when the machine stopped turning, the system had to feed on itself. And no one, not even a Putin, was safe anymore. Number 7. Samuel Israel III, the billionaire who faked his death. In the golden era of greed, where Wall Street was the new Colosseum, Samuel Israel III thrived. He had the bloodline, the connections, and the hunger. The Israel family were financial royalty. His grandfather co-founded one of the most powerful bond brokerages in New York, but Sam didn't want to follow. He wanted to dominate. And by the time he was 30, he had built something extraordinary, a hedge fund called Bayou, a name that would soon become infamous for being one of the first major hedge fund frauds in US history. A fund that wasn't just built to make money, it was built to hide the truth. Founded in 1996, Bayou Management LLC was Sam Israel's baby. He marketed it as a revolutionary hedge fund, one based on transparency and consistent returns. And for a while, it worked. Investors poured in over $450 million. But behind the closed doors of Bayou, the numbers weren't adding up. Losses mounted, trades flopped. And instead of telling the truth, Sam chose deception. He didn't just fudge reports. He created a fake accounting firm, Richmond Fairfield Associates, to audit his own fund. The firm existed only on paper. It gave Bayou glowing reviews, signed, sealed, and completely fabricated. This wasn't incompetence. It was orchestrated fraud. By 1998, Bayou was bleeding money. Instead of shutting down and returning what was left, Sam and his co-conspirator, Daniel Marino, doubled down. They began shifting money between investor accounts to mimic profits. When that wasn't enough, they created more fake documents, phony trades, forged wire transfers. Bayou's books were a complete fiction, but investors saw none of that. They saw yachts, Rolexes, fast cars. They saw confidence. And Sam Israel, he played the part perfectly. Armani suits, exclusive parties, smooth pitches, he was Wall Street's golden conman. By 2004, the Ponzi-like scheme began to crack. A few investors requested audits, some asked for full redemptions. The charade became harder to maintain. In 2005, the truth finally spilled out. The SEC and federal prosecutors charged Sam Israel and Daniel Marino with fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Investigators discovered tens of millions funneled into offshore accounts, personal luxury purchases, and cover-up operations. Bayou was exposed as a house of cards. But the twist? Sam didn't go quietly. On June 9, 2008, the day he was supposed to report to prison to begin his 20-year sentence, Sam Israel disappeared. His GMC Envoy was found on Bear Mountain Bridge, north of New York City. The engine was still warm. On the dashboard sat a note, scribbled in all caps. "Suicide is painless." To the public, it seemed like a tragic end. A broken man facing justice, choosing death over disgrace. News outlets ran with the story. But the FBI wasn't convinced. Authorities scoured the Hudson River, helicopters circled. Divers went in. But there was no body, no clothing, no witness, no splash. It quickly became clear. Samuel Israel III had faked his death. He had staged a suicide to escape federal prison. The DOJ launched a national manhunt. Interpol was alerted. His face was everywhere. But Sam had something most fugitives didn't. Millions in hidden assets, offshore connections, and a head start. Sam fled in an RVA luxury mobile hideout prepped and stocked for weeks. He traveled back roads, avoided cameras, and even got plastic surgery consultations. But freedom has a cost. He relied on Deborah Ryan, his longtime girlfriend, for food, money, and supplies. She helped him hide, drove to meet him, provided burner phones and fake IDs. Then one day she snapped. On July 2, 2008, Ryan walked into a state trooper barracks in Massachusetts and confessed. Within hours, agents swarmed the RV. Sam was arrested tired, unshaven, alone. His escape had lasted just 23 days. In court, Sam Israel's arrogance had turned into shame. He pleaded guilty to failure to report to prison and conspiracy to escape. His original 20-year sentence was extended by 2 more years. But for the victims, the ones who lost life savings, retirement accounts, inheritances, it wasn't enough. One elderly couple told the court, "He didn't just steal our money. He stole our peace, our future, our faith in people." The judge called Sam a coward and a serial deceiver. And with that, the man who once managed nearly $500 million was led away in shackles to serve a sentence no fake death could escape. Sam Israel was transferred to FCI Butner Medium in North Carolina, the same complex that housed Bernie Madoff. For the first time in his life, he had no wealth, no freedom, no audience. Reports say he tried to offer financial advice to other inmates. Some laughed, others ignored him. He faded into obscurity, just another number in a system he once thought he could outwit. In prison interviews, he claimed he was remorseful, but survivors never believed it. He had faked too many things. Today, when people speak of hedge fund crimes, they often jump to Madoff. But Sam Israel was the blueprint. The first modern-era hedge fund fraud to break headlines. He didn't just steal money. He built a fantasy, marketed it, maintained it for a decade, and then tried to vanish forever. His story is a case study in psychological manipulation, investor trust abuse, white-collar arrogance, desperation-driven delusion, and perhaps most tragically, it's a reminder of how Wall Street's flashiest faces can often hide the darkest truths. Samuel Israel III once believed he could trick the system, cheat death, and rewrite his ending. But in the end, the lie caught up with him. His life went from billion-dollar boardrooms to a cold cement cell, because no amount of deception, no suicide note, and no family name can protect you from the truth. Number 6. Carlos Ghosn, the escape artist. In the global auto industry, few names carried more weight than Carlos Ghosn. They called him Le Cost Killer, Mr. Fix-It, the man who saved Nissan from collapse and turned it into one of the world's most profitable car companies. He was the first executive to simultaneously run 3 major car manufacturers, Nissan, Renault, and Mitsubishi, under a powerful alliance that spanned Japan and Europe. He oversaw nearly $500 billion in combined assets and tens of thousands of employees. But the higher you climb, the harder you fall. And Ghosn's fall wasn't just shocking. It was cinematic. Carlos Ghosn was born in Brazil in 1954 to Lebanese immigrant parents. Raised between Brazil, Lebanon, and France, he developed a global mindset early on. Educated at the prestigious École Polytechnique and École des Mines, Ghosn spoke multiple languages and understood international markets better than most. He began his career at Michelin and then moved to Renault. By the late 1990s, Japan's Nissan Motors was in financial ruins. Enter Ghosn, who Renault sent as a corporate savior. And save it he did. He slashed costs, closed plants, laid off thousands, and returned Nissan to profitability in less than 2 years. For Japan, it was unheard of. To the world, Ghosn was a hero. A living symbol of efficiency and global capitalism. But in private, he lived like royalty. As his power grew, so did his lifestyle. Ghosn's salary soared to nearly $20 million per year, making him one of the highest-paid executives in the world. He was granted company-owned homes in Paris, Tokyo, Beirut, and Rio. He flew private. He dined at Michelin star restaurants. He even hosted his own lavish 60th birthday party at the Palace of Versailles, an event paid for, in part, by Renault funds. In public, he was a disciplined CEO. In private, he was building a financial empire for himself. And eventually, someone noticed. On November 19, 2018, Carlos Ghosn landed at Tokyo's Haneda Airport. He never made it to his home. Japanese prosecutors and Nissan officials were waiting. He was arrested on the spot, accused of financial misconduct, including underreporting his salary, hiding tens of millions in compensation, and using company funds for personal use. The business world was stunned. The man who'd saved Nissan was now in handcuffs. He was taken to the Tokyo detention house, where he was held in solitary confinement. Lights on 24/7. No internet, no news, no phone calls. Ghosn called it hostage justice. But Japanese officials called it law. Over the next several months, charges piled up. Hiding over $80 million in future compensation. Transferring personal losses to Nissan during the 2008 financial crisis. Using Nissan funds to buy personal homes in Beirut and Rio. Paying $14.7 million to a Saudi businessman to cover private debts. Prosecutors painted Ghosn as a corporate thief, a man who ran Nissan like his private piggy bank. Ghosn claimed he was the victim of a coup plot by Nissan insiders who feared his plans to merge the companies and shift power to France. Whether conspiracy or crime, the reality was this. Carlos Ghosn was facing up to 15 years in prison. As the months dragged on, Ghosn was released on strict bail conditions. No travel, no internet, monitored phone use, constant surveillance. But what happened next would enter criminal folklore. On December 29, 2019, Ghosn vanished from Tokyo. He boarded a bullet train. Cameras caught his image one last time, then nothing. Hours later, a private jet took off from Osaka. On board was a large black case used to carry concert equipment. Inside the case, Carlos Ghosn. Smuggled through airport security without being x-rayed, breathing through hidden holes in the box. The world woke up to headlines. Carlos Ghosn escapes Japan. From his new home in Beirut, Ghosn held a press conference. He declared, "I have not fled justice, I have escaped injustice." Lebanon had no extradition treaty with Japan. Ghosn was now a free man, untouchable by Tokyo courts. He blamed Nissan executives, Japanese prosecutors, and a system that presumes guilt over innocence. To some, he was a criminal. To others, he was Jason Bourne in a business suit. Either way, he got away with it. Japan was humiliated. Ghosn's escape sparked international outrage. Interpol issued a red notice. Japan demanded his return. Lebanon refused. Meanwhile, two men who helped smuggle Ghosn out of Japan, Michael and Peter Taylor, former U.S. Army Green Berets, were arrested, extradited to Japan, and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Ghosn's wife, Carol, was also questioned and banned from leaving Lebanon for a time. Ghosn insisted he had no regrets. In the West, Ghosn had once been a leadership icon. His books were taught in business schools. His strategies were case studies, but in the wake of his arrest and escape, many began asking, was Ghosn just another arrogant CEO? Or was he a visionary brought down by nationalism and internal politics? The truth is probably somewhere in between. Yes, Nissan insiders feared him. Yes, the Japanese justice system is harsh. But yes, Carlos Ghosn abused his position for personal gain. And when caught, he didn't fight in court, he ran. Today, Carlos Ghosn lives in Lebanon, giving occasional interviews, writing books, and teaching business strategy at local universities. He still maintains his innocence, says he was set up, and even launched a countersuit against Nissan. But his life is a cage, even if it isn't a cell. He cannot travel. He cannot rebuild his empire. He cannot clear his name. He has traded prison bars for invisible borders. Carlos Ghosn was a titan, a fixer, a genius, and in the end, an outlaw. He didn't just escape a prison, he escaped a system. But not the judgment of history, because no matter how brilliant your mind is, when you believe you're above the rules, you're already falling. They lied, stole, and some even faked their deaths. Yet justice caught up or nearly did. But the most shocking are still ahead. The next 5 shattered public trust, manipulated nations, and left legacies of betrayal. From Silicon Valley to Wall Street, the countdown continues.